I am 73 years old. I have performed more than 400 exorcisms across 31 years of ordained ministry in the Catholic Church. I have been in rooms where people screamed in languages they did not speak. I have held down men twice my size. I have watched things happen that I cannot explain with any framework I was given in seminary. 400 times I walked into someone's darkness, and I walked back out. And in all of that, across all of those years and all of those rooms, there is one family I think about every single day. Not because of what I saw in that house, because of what I chose not to see. My name is Father Dominic Ferrara, and what I am about to tell you is the only confession I have ever made that actually cost me something. If this testimony reaches even one person who needs to hear it, that is enough. So please, take a moment right now, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so that when more testimonies like this one are shared, you will be there to receive them. These words belong to the people who were never given the chance to speak their own. I grew up in South Philadelphia, the second of 5 children in a family where the church was not a choice. It was the architecture of everything. My mother kept a statue of the Virgin Mary on the kitchen windowsill next to the dish soap. My father went to 6 o'clock Mass before every shift at the water treatment plant. When I told them at 17 that I felt called to the priesthood, my mother wept. Not from sadness, from the particular pride of a woman who believes her son has been chosen by God Himself. I was ordained in 1981. I was 26 years old, and I believed with every cell in my body that I had been given access to something real, something ancient and true and more powerful than anything the secular world could offer. I was assigned to a parish in the Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia. Small congregation, aging building, beautiful community. I threw myself into it. Youth groups, hospital visits, grief counseling, funerals. I was the kind of priest who answered the phone at 11 at night. I was told early by my pastor that I had a gift for being present with suffering, that I did not flinch. In 1987, the diocese approached me about additional training. A senior priest who specialized in what the church called deliverance ministry asked to meet with me. He was in his late 60s, and he had performed exorcisms since the 1960s, and he carried that history the way some men carry war, quietly, without display, and with a weight that showed only in small moments. He evaluated me over 6 months. He brought me into 2 cases as an observer, and then he told the bishop he believed I was suited for the work. The formal training was rigorous in ways people do not expect. It was not about dramatics. It was about discernment. The church's position was careful, almost clinical. Most people who came to us presenting with what they believed was demonic involvement were suffering from psychiatric illness, trauma, or profound spiritual crisis. And they needed a doctor or a counselor or both, not a ritual. My mentor was emphatic about this. He would say, the first duty of the exorcist is not to perform the rite. It is to determine whether the rite is warranted. That discernment process could take weeks. We interviewed families. We required documentation of psychiatric evaluations. We collaborated with Catholic psychiatrists. We were not supposed to proceed without that foundation. I say supposed to, because what I am about to tell you happened in a year when I stopped following my own training. The Mancuso family contacted the diocese in the spring of 1994. I was assigned to their case. They lived in a row house in northeast Philadelphia, mother, father, and their 15-year-old daughter, Nina. The referral came through their parish priest, who described the situation as urgent. He said Nina had been exhibiting extreme behavioral changes for approximately 8 months. Violent outbursts, refusal to eat, insomnia. She had been evaluated by a psychiatrist once, briefly, and the family had discontinued after 2 sessions. Their parish priest told me the father, Marco Mancuso, was firmly convinced this was a spiritual problem and was resistant to any further psychiatric involvement. I drove to their home on a Tuesday evening in April. It was warm for the season, and the block smelled like someone grilling a few houses down. Marco answered the door. He was a large man, maybe 50, with the hands of someone who had worked construction his whole life. He shook my hand with both of his and said, "Father, thank God you came." His wife, Rosaria, stood behind him in the hallway, with a rosary wrapped around her left hand so tightly the beads left marks in her palm. She had been crying recently. Her eyes had that particular flatness that comes after a long time of crying regularly. Nina was not downstairs when I arrived. Marco told me she had locked herself in her room that afternoon when she heard a priest was coming. He said that was proof. He said the presence of a man of God agitated whatever was inside her. He said this with complete conviction, the way a man states a fact he has verified personally and repeatedly. I asked to speak with Rosaria alone first. Marco left the room reluctantly, and in the 3 minutes I had with her before he came back, Rosaria said something I did not handle correctly. She said, quietly, that she was not sure the problem was spiritual. She said Nina had been different since a family gathering the previous summer. She said there was an uncle. She started to say something further, and then Marco was back in the doorway and her face closed like a door shutting. I noted it. I wrote it in my small notebook. And then I allowed the momentum of the situation to carry me forward in a direction I should not have gone. If you are someone who has ever doubted what you were told in a room where everyone else seemed certain, this testimony is for you. Please stay with me. And if this channel has reached you at a moment when you needed it, like this video and activate the notification bell so others can find their way here too. Marco was insistent. He had clearly been waiting months for this appointment. He walked me through everything. Nina's behavioral history, the objects she had allegedly moved, the voices he claimed she spoke in at night. He had a handwritten timeline on a legal pad. He had printed passages from Catholic literature on possession. He was prepared. He was a father who believed his daughter was in spiritual danger, and he had done his homework, and now the church had finally sent someone to help him. I did not request a second psychiatric evaluation before proceeding. I told myself the initial evaluation had been documented, and that was sufficient. I told myself the urgency of the family's distress warranted moving forward. Both of those things were rationalizations. The truth is simpler and harder. Marco's certainty was easier to work with than Rosaria's doubt. And I was tired that season in ways I had not admitted to anyone. I had been doing this work for 7 years, and I had not taken a retreat in 3. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to walk into that row house and do the thing I had been trained to do and walk out having helped someone. That wanting, that desire to be the answer, is one of the most dangerous things a person in authority can carry. I met Nina the following week. She was brought downstairs by her mother. She was small for 15, thin in the way that worried me immediately. Not delicate, but diminished, like someone who had been taking up less and less space deliberately. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with her hands in her lap, and she looked at the table, not at me. I asked her simple questions. How are you sleeping? Are you eating? What do you enjoy? She answered in monosyllables. Not out of insolence, out of exhaustion and something else that I recognized but did not name correctly in that room. When I asked her whether she felt there was something wrong with her spiritually, she looked up at me for the first time. She had dark eyes, very still, and she said, "I'm not possessed, Father. I'm afraid." I asked her what she was afraid of. She looked at her father, who was sitting at the far end of the table, and then she looked back at the table. She said, "I don't know." But she did know. I know now that she knew. I performed the rite of exorcism on Nina Mancuso on a Saturday morning in May of 1994. It was myself, a deacon as witness, Marco, and Rosaria. Nina sat in a chair in the living room. She did not exhibit what the church's criteria describe as signs of possession. She cried. She asked her mother twice to make it stop. She said once, very clearly, "This isn't what's wrong with me." I told her that resistance was sometimes part of the process. I said the words of the ritual over a 15-year-old girl who was telling me plainly that I was treating the wrong wound, and I said them anyway. 3 months later, Nina disclosed to a school counselor that she had been sexually abused by her paternal uncle at the family gathering the previous summer. The uncle Marco had invited into their home the man who had been present at Christmas that year. The investigation that followed determined the abuse had occurred on multiple occasions. Nina was referred to a trauma therapist. The school counselor filed the required report. The uncle was eventually prosecuted. None of that involved me. None of that involved the church. The system that finally saw Nina was a public school counselor doing her job. I learned what had happened through Nina's parish priest 6 months after the disclosure. I sat in my office with that information for a long time. I thought about the morning in that living room. I thought about what Rosaria had started to say before Marco came back into the room. I thought about Nina saying, "I am afraid." I thought about Nina saying, "This is not what is wrong with me." I thought about myself saying resistance is sometimes part of the process. I had performed the rite of exorcism on a 15-year-old girl who was suffering from the aftermath of sexual trauma. And I had done it because her father was certain, and I was tired, and Rosaria's doubt was harder to sit with than Marco's conviction. If you have stayed with me this long, thank you. Genuinely, what I am about to say is the part that matters most. If this testimony protects even one child, then it has done more good than I managed in that room in 1994. Please like this video and turn on the notification bell so that this kind of truth can reach more people who need to hear it. I continued in ministry for 11 more years. I performed exorcisms. I told myself that Nina had received care eventually, that the system had worked, even if slowly, even if not through me. I told myself I had acted in good faith with the information I had. I told myself that Rosaria's comment had been ambiguous. I built a careful architecture of self-justification, and I lived inside it because the alternative was to admit that I had been the wrong kind of certain in a room where a child was asking for a different kind of help. I left active ministry in 2005. I was diagnosed with a heart condition the following year. In the months after the diagnosis, something shifted. Not dramatically, quietly. The architecture started to develop cracks. I began reading the Gospels the way I had not read them since seminary, not to find support for what I already believed, but without knowing what I would find. And what I found was a figure who saw people, who asked what they actually needed, who touched the untouchable, who did not perform sacred authority in the presence of suffering. He dismantled it. I have thought about Nina Mancuso every single day for 30 years. I do not think about the ritual. I think about her saying, "I am afraid." I think about the pause before she looked at her father. I think about what Rosaria started to say. Those pauses, the things people almost say in rooms where someone with authority has the power to determine what happens next, those pauses are where the failure lives. Not in dramatic moments of decision, in the small adjustments we make to avoid the harder question. I am not telling this story because I expect absolution. I am telling it because Nina deserved someone in that room who was willing to be uncertain. She deserved someone who could hear "I am afraid" and ask afraid of what, and then stay quiet long enough to let her answer. She deserved someone whose desire to help did not outrun their willingness to listen. If you are someone in authority, in any institution, in any capacity, and there is a child in front of you saying, "This is not what is wrong with me," please stop. Please listen. Please be willing to not know. Your certainty is not the gift you think it is. Mine was not. Nina's story is being heard now. It is incomplete and it is late, and I am sorry for both of those things. But it is being heard. And if the telling of it makes one person in one room somewhere ask a better question, then I will not have been entirely silent. I will not be silent anymore. If this reached you, please like this video and turn on the notification bell. More testimonies like this one deserve to be heard, and every witness matters.